Hello and welcome to the Plains and Prairie Bible Wrap video tutorial. And I'm going to start by showing you how to put the pattern together. You'll want to print all of the pages at 100%. Make sure your printer is set to print at 100% and check the 1-inch square guide to make sure they've printed at the correct size and scale. Then every page is either going to have a line that says match to here or cut here. And on all the lines that say cut here, it's a little gray dotted line. You're going to cut on the line. Only cut the gray dotted lines, they're actually dashed, gray dashed lines that say cut to here. There are a few other lines on the pattern that are not intended for cutting, such as on piece A. These are dotted and they're the guides for putting E and F on the front. So again, we're just cutting on the very edges of the paper if it says match to here or cut here. It's best to cut all of your dotted lines off first and then assemble the pattern. It flows a little bit easier together that way. And when you go to match, each cut is going to have a marker that corresponds to the other page. So A1 will go to A1, A2 will have an A2, A4 to A4, and so forth. So you'll match those and take some tape. It's important to be careful with A that you're cutting very accurately and taping accurately. Since it's a big pattern piece, it will get a little bit off. If that happens, it's okay. Just cut kind of straight on the edge of the line when you get to that part. If it got a little bit mismatched, it'll still be fine. Okay, now that I have all the pieces taped together, I just wanted to go over a few things with you. There's a little bit more guidance on these patterns than some of my previous patterns have. So first of all, on piece A, well actually on every single pattern piece, they all share the left border. So the small, medium, large, and extra large all share that for this large border. And for piece A, you have two guide dotted lines. You do not ever cut these. These are just going to be for lining up piece E and F later. We have markers here. This is for where to place the strap or elastic later, again helping you mark where that goes on the outside. And for each bag, for each wrap, there's a small, medium, large, or extra large option. Small is the green, medium's pink, large is blue, and extra large is purple. So for the small, you would cut on the shared left line around the green all the way around. Medium has its own line all the way around, and so forth. It also shows for the lining, because we're not using interfacing on the lining pieces, the direction of fabric. You're going to want to place that on the warp, which is the longest direction of fabric. So if you have a bolt of fabric, the warp is going to be this direction and the weft is this direction. So we're going to want to place, and it's really easy if you're using stripes, you're going to want the stripes to go in the same direction as the arrow. For pattern piece B, which is here, again, they all share the left border. You're going to place it on the fold, so the fabric will be folded over when you cut. And small has its own line, medium has its own. Large and extra large share the right border. That's why it's dashed in purple and blue. And again, showing the direction of the fabric. C and D will come on the same sort of page, if you will. C is also placed on the fold. So B and C are very important to place on the fold. And they all have their own top, right, and bottom borders to cut. D, scrunch it up here a little bit. So D, actually I'll turn it this way for you. You're gonna cut everything on its left shared border, but for the small, medium, and large, you're gonna use this black border. Only for the extra large, you'll cut the very exterior. So small would be down, green, black. Medium would be black, pink, black, and so forth. E is the same way. Everyone shares this border. Small would go green, back up black, medium pink, back up black, large blue, extra large all the way around the outside. For F, similar, but small through large are just black. So you just cut the black out for small, medium, and large. For extra large, it's the very exterior black plus purple. So here I'm going to show you how to alter the pattern if your Bible doesn't fit, if it's a different proportion. Most Bibles are a standard ratio. However, you can see that some, like the thin line, are not in the same ratio, and therefore it might be better for you to alter the pattern to fit it. So for the thin line, I'm just going to show you some measurements here real fast. So the medium, the height is 9.5 and the width is 6.5. For the small, the height is 7.5 and the width is 5.5. So deciding where your Bible fits. This measures 8 3/4, so that would put you in the medium. But when you go to the width, it measures 5 1/2. So that puts you in the small. So what do? It's better to go to the pattern that fits the width the best because it's very easy to alter the height. So when choosing which size to make, choose the one that fits your width best. And I'll show you why. This is the medium. So if I had chosen to put this in the medium, the height would be fine, but the width is way too big. So we're going to choose to make the small. Showing you the small here. Now the height obviously is not going to work, but the width is going to be just right. So how do you tailor the pattern to fit? So we'll start by measuring our Bible one more time. I have 8 3/4 height, and my width is 5 1/2. We already decided that it would be best for me to go to the small, but I need to fix the height to make it bigger. Now a little help you're going to get on the pattern is the arrows are pointing to the height. So you know which side of the pattern you need to add length. The secret to making it bigger is just adding 1 inch to your width, to your height, I'm sorry, 1 inch to your height. So that will make 8.75 plus 1 is going to be 9.75 inches. And that's all the more math you're going to have to do, I promise. You're just adding 1 inch to your height. So this green line here is the bottom of my small, and all I have to do is find 9.75 and make a new line. Just lining it up here. All right, and I like to go just a tad over because it never hurts to be a tad over. So I've drawn this new line, and I'm gonna cut on the black line and then the rest of the green line. And remember, we all have that shared left-hand border that we don't have to worry about. And again, we're not adding 1 inch to the small, we're adding 1 inch to our original measurement. So this is 9.75. Okay, so I'm just gonna double check my measurement again because it's always good to double check before you cut your fabric. I want the overall measurement to be 9.75, and you see that it's a hair over, which again I said I like to be just safe because that little tiny 1/8 of an inch is not going to hurt your pattern. If it's a little bigger, it can hurt your pattern if it's a little smaller. So we've given it a generous 9 3/4, And we're gonna do that to all the other pattern pieces except for F. So for B, again, we're using size small. This is our height, the arrow's pushing up. We're gonna go from measuring from here, the green small, I did 9 3/4 of an inch, and I'm gonna cut on the green small pattern. Quickly gonna show you C and D again, small, 9.75, the height. Taking our ruler from the green line, a generous 9.75, marking, and marking. Okay, so you'll cut this one out, common line, green line, black line. Same for D. D is kind of one of the funny pieces, so I'll show you that. Again, height, 9.75, small. So from the small, get your generous 9.75, make your mark, make your new mark, and cutting out the small. Final thing that I want to make a note of before I cut C, if you're making the extra large and you have a really big Bible, I believe the spiral Bibles can get very large and you need it to be longer, you found that it's not long enough, you can add, when you're increasing the width instead of the height, you can add to pattern piece C and pattern piece A the exact same amount. Here's E. I've added that extra bit to the top, cut on the black, green for small, black, and my new line. F stays the same. You just cut out, because I'm doing small, on the black line, the original size of F. When it comes to the strap or elastic part, when you've altered the pattern, the elastic is easy because it's going to be the height of A. So that's how long my piece would be for elastic. And you're still going to use the marker. If you need to extend that line up, you can do that, but you're using the small marker because you're using the small pattern. For the cotton strap or the cotton webbing, I would suggest going with the medium because once the pattern is complete, it's really easy to, so you'll be here on the bottom strap. If it's too long, it's easy to trim it or to just take it one more and make it shorter. So that's an easy alteration to make at the end. So I've finished our altered pattern. Just have to close up the top, but I just want to show you the fit now. So the fit looks really good. It's comfortable on the height. And if you have a hardback book, when you put them in, you'll have to insert them kind of folded back like that. The softer ones are easier to get in there. Okay, so the fit looks really good. The Bible's secure, lays nicely. And these were made to have a journal. So you can put your journal in the side. And then when we close it up, it's really almost a perfect fit. Going to put the elastic over the top, which fits nicely. The same goes for, let's say, maybe the journaling Bibles, like the width is much bigger, but the height is much smaller. Just, again, choose the pattern that the width is the best. I have gone ahead and chosen to make the large for this video. So I cut along the blue line, and for pattern piece A, we're gonna need 1 quilt, 1 interfacing, and 1 lining. So I've cut 1 piece of quilt, 1 piece of interfacing, and 1 piece of lining. And while I do have a note that the lining should be placed on the warp, I cut it on the weft. I like the contrast, especially for the video, so that you can see where the pockets are. And since A will have interfacing, it doesn't matter as much. It's kind of a style choice that I made here. Pieces B and C were 1 lining, cut on the fold. So here's our fold mark, and that means that the fabric was folded over when I cut it. And the same will go for B. Now, if you're an advanced pattern maker, you might feel that pattern B should have been cut with the fold on this side. It doesn't matter for the assembly of the pattern unless you, for some reason, had, let's say this was like a very pretty design and this was like less attractive of as a design, because the fold is going to end up going this way. I wanted to keep the pattern pieces universal so that the common left border was shared. For most of you, just ignore that, it probably won't matter. But if you are an advanced pattern user, you might notice that. It's not a flaw, it was just a choice in keeping this uniform for the more beginner intermediate users. For D, E, and F, we're cutting just one lining. I made a note here so that when you get done with B and C, you'd stop going on the folds. So these are just single pieces of fabric in the lining, cut out, again, running the warp in the direction. So to start out sewing, we're gonna take piece A, just the quilt and the interfacing. And the interfacing has a shiny glue side and the quilt has a wrong side. It's a side that you're not gonna see in the finished wrap. And you're gonna wanna put the glue side onto the wrong side and use the instructions that come with your interfacing. And just a note, because the size on this matters, you're not necessarily saying you want to stretch the quilt, but your interfacing is the correct size. The quilt itself is very stretchy, or not stretchy. I mean, it moves around a lot. So it's important to get the right size that when you're ironing, you're making sure that the quilt isn't like very far under the interfacing, that you're really making the quilt exactly the same size as the interfacing as much as possible. And again, use the instructions that come with the interfacing to iron this. So I've ironed them together and I have a little bit of quilt that came out. So what I like to do, just to make sure that going forward the other pieces are gonna fit well, you can use pattern piece A to trim up. So I have just a little to trim here. You can use a water soluble marker. It's gonna be on the inside, so you could use a pen too. I'm just gonna mark where it got a little too big and trim it back up so that's the exact same size as pattern piece A. Important though, you don't want to trim smaller. So leaving like a hair over would be better. You don't want to end up trimming it so that it gets smaller than the pattern piece. If you're super, super close like this, just don't worry about it. You don't have to trim that up. But for me here, this is about 1/4 of an inch, so it's too big and I need to fix that. So you can set A aside and gather up E and F. And I just wanted to mention that I like to leave the colored edge, so I don't want to cut so far inside that I can't see the color anymore. That way I know if I'm using this to trim up a piece later that I didn't over trim. So I can see what the original pattern size was with certainty. So we're going to take E and F. And we have two choices here that I like. One is a water soluble marker, so water makes the mark go away. Be careful with these though, if you use too much it kind of doesn't go away. Or a Hera marker. If you have stripes fabric, the marker works really good because you kind of already have a guide. So E is the base, it's the backing, and F is the pocket itself. So we're gonna fold it in half, wrong sides together. And you can give it a little crease. This can also help crease it. So your fold is going up at the top and the raw edge is down at the bottom. You can either use the Hera marker and a ruler to mark. And you'll see you get a little bit of a line. It's a little hard to see on the stripe. Or you can pull this up a little bit and make a mark at the bottom for each dotted line. I'll try to show you that up close. So there's a mark for each dotted line. Then we're gonna take and place this on E so that it's totally lined up. If this is a directional fabric, this is the top and this is the bottom. And then you're gonna sew up to the end of the pocket and then backstitch a few times on each of these lines. So you can see we've sewn on those lines and backstitched at the top. And this is for the pens. So then we're gonna grab piece A again, and you need to choose which side you want to show, and I'll show you on the finished piece why. So this part ended up showing on the final. This part got covered by the pen case. So we need to choose which side we want to show. I like this one because it has more of the feed sack. This side has less, so I'm going to choose to cover this. If we chose to make this the primary that will show, you would need to flip it over. But since I'm going with this as my showing side, I'll leave it just like that. So the showing side and the pen side. And put the pen case over here on this side. Also important to note that it's going to be on the left side with the pen pocket facing up. This direction placement is very important. Now we're gonna take pattern piece A and place it on top of the quilt. And if you were doing the extra large, you would use this purple line that says guide for piece XL only. We are doing the large, so it's guide for pieces small through large, the gray line. So making sure that you're lined up with the edge, the left side edge here, come over here to the dots and make a mark. And do the same thing on the bottom, lining up over here and make a mark. At this time, you can also mark for your straps. So lining up the edge again, and the blue is for the large. Make a mark and make a mark. So I'll show you those close up. There's the line for the strap and the mark for piece EF. Once you have marked your 1/4 inch lines, you're going to take this and put it right sides together. So you're now looking at the wrong side of EF, and you're going to place just at the edge of the dot at the top and the bottom. So the dot is here, the dot you marked is here, the raw edge is just touching, and the right sides are together. And then you're going to sew 1/4 inch away from the raw edge. Again, just making sure your pen pocket was facing up on the left side. We sewed 1/4 inch away, and now we're going to flip it over, and it should match just about perfectly on all the edges. And now we're going to top stitch about 1/8 inch away from the edge, and then 1/8 inch of the edge all the way around to keep it down and secure. And I apologize if I didn't mention, because with vintage quilts you don't tend to need to press your seams as much, but if you're using fabric, you would want to probably have pressed this over before you top stitched it. So now the outside is complete, we are going to move on to adding the strap or the elastic to it. So when you get to the straps and the instructions after this, it'll give you your measurements as to how long to cut them. For the large, the elastic is going to be the same width as the pattern piece. You can also cut it to the measurement in the instructions, but it's also that size. And either the cotton webbing or the cotton fabric is going to be 12 inches. So I would cut, if I was doing webbing, 2 pieces that are 12 inches long, you need 2, or for the fabric strap, this is 3 inches wide, and I need 2 pieces that are 12 inches. And we'll need the interfacing. So I'm going to show using the cotton fabric that you'll make on your own, but for the webbing it will be exactly the same process once this is assembled. To assemble these, it's hard to see, but this is the right side of the fabric, this is the wrong side. So wrong side facing up, and the interfacing, now this is a personal choice. They can get too thin and they can get too thick, so personally I like to use just 1 inch of the interfacing. If you use 1.5 inch, it'll be a little bit thicker. If you went full 3 inches, it'll be really stiff. So after you make one, or after you make this portion, maybe kind of feel it out and see how you feel about it. But I think this is the best balance to go through the buckle and have enough strength, but to also be flexible. So we're gonna iron these on the bottom edge using the instructions with the interfacing. So here the interfacing has been ironed to the wrong side. You could even go 1/2 inch if you wanted here. And then the next step is to full iron it in half, and then iron each raw edge to that center iron mark, and then fold it together and iron here. Then we're going to top stitch on both sides about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. So I've stitched them 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'm going to trim the side end off here, and on one piece we're going to fold it up about 1/8 of an inch and stitch across. If that's hard for you, you can do more like 3/4 of an inch and stitch across. For the buckle side, I'm going to trim it again and place it through the slide buckle. Don't know why I can't get him to go. There we go. And it's going to come out about 2 inches. Fold it over, turn it over, and fold so that the raw edge comes to about where the buckle is, and then turn it to itself and stitch around in a square. So the last step in this process is attaching them to the quilts. If you didn't use pattern piece A to mark these, then you'll need to do that now. For elastic, you're gonna take and center it on that dot and stitch it down 1/4 of an inch. I like to go back and forth a few times. Make sure the elastic is flat and stitch it down. I cut it a little bit too long just to make sure that I don't stretch it, and then you can trim the excess. For the strap, this is the what I would call the right side, and this is the wrong side. So I'm going to put right side down, and again we're going to center it on the mark we made, and sew that, again zigzagging 1/4 of an inch up there. And I like to call this the right side and this the wrong side, so right side down, again centering on the mark, and we'll stitch that down. I've sewn them down, and you can see kind of what I mean by zigzag. You're just back and forth to keep it in place. And what you want to do also is make sure that they lined up. If they're really far off, you want to fix that right now, and you can set this piece aside. Okay, so moving on to the lining or the inside of the wrap, we're going to take pieces B and C. They're very similar. This is the folded edge. You're going to sew 1/2 of an inch away from the fold all the way down on the folded edge. The same for C. We're going to sew 1/2 of an inch all the way down on the folded edge. So these have been sewn 1/2 of an inch from the edge on the folded edge. Again, don't use irons a lot because vintage quilts don't need it, but you could have ironed this before stitching, and you can also iron after if you want a really crisp edge. We're gonna go to pattern piece D, and we're going to fold wrong sides together about 1/2 of an inch, and you can iron that, and then fold again over 1/2 inch, iron that, and then stitch on the edge. So now we're going to build the lining pieces together. This is piece B that we folded in half, and the folded edge is going to be on the inside. The raw edges are going to match on all the corners and the sides. This is piece C, and this is the folded edge of piece C. We're going to place it on the right side, lining up all the raw edges. And this is piece D that you had just folded the one edge over, and that goes at the very edge. And we're going to clip or pin them all the way around and sew 1/8 of an inch around the edge. Okay, I've sewn all the way around, all the pieces are secure. This is a folded edge, these are the folded edges, double checking. And we take our piece A. We want to secure these straps out of the way. You can use pins, but I tend to poke myself with pins, so I'm just gonna fold them sort of up and out of the way and use painter's tape or masking tape, and that should be fine. Just want to make sure we're not catching the ends when we sew together. So with piece A lining, so that it goes B, C, D, you're going to place the side with the pen pocket on CD. The side without anything is going to go on side B. This is really, really important. Otherwise, it'll be upside down and backwards. And then right here, where there's no double, this is just A all by itself, we're going to leave it open on one side from here to here so that we can turn it inside out. So clip or pin all the way around and stitch together. We've sewn together, and I left this open here. We're going to clip all the corners off, and we're going to get really tight because they're very bulky. And depending on how you might have backstitched or started, it might feel like you're going to cut some of those important threads. So I'll show you a trick. After we've clipped all the corners, we're going to sew back and forth right on the very edge of all the corners. So I have backstitched back and forth over the edge. Now we're going to find the gap we left and make sure you get on the outside of the pockets to the end. And I grab a corner and we're going to pull it through the gap. Once you get it turned inside out, press all the corners out. You might need to use a tool to do that. Just make sure you get them really as sharp as possible. Now we're going to double check that we did everything correct. So the Bible will go in here and we would fold it over, and hopefully our pen case is facing up on this side when we fold it over. Also going to take this time to make sure that the strap looks good. Just double checking again. Fold it over, fold it over. And that works. So I'm going to show you how to close up the gap. Now I'm going to show you how to finish it up. We're going to trim any of the threads up here that are in the way. Okay, then we'll take a thread and needle, and at the end, wrap it around your finger once and twist. There you have a knot. And we're going to go in the very edge here. And then I'm gonna go directly into the lining. All right, now to begin the ladder stitch, you go 1/4 of an inch over, then you go, and you wanna make sure, you might pin or clip this. I find it's easiest just to fold and hold it, but you can clip or pin here. So we're gonna go directly over to the quilt, 1/4 of an inch, directly over to the lining, 1/4 of an inch. You don't want to go diagonally like over here. You want to go straight across. That's why it's called a ladder, like you're making rungs of a ladder. And over, and straight over, and straight over. Keeping these folded together. So once you get to the edge, you want to make sure that you pull it tight. Not too tight that it bunches, but just enough that it closes. You could finish with a quilter's knot, which would be wrapping it around the needle, 1, 2, 3, let's say 4, and then hold it down, pull it through. There's a little knot there, and then you just take it through and it'll pull through. Not very secure, in my opinion, for this situation, so I'm gonna go back up and I'm gonna finish it with a knot like this. Just take a tiny bit of the edge, so barely visible. Do it about 3 times. And then I'm still gonna pull it down through. And you have a hidden edge there. When you do pull the ladder stitch, don't pull it too tight. It'll get bunched, but just enough to make it closed. And the wrap is finished. I am going to show you some alterations if your Bible doesn't quite fit the sizes provided.